Okay, what's up, everybody? I just wanted to hop in here real quick and I felt like I needed to do a follow-up to the last episode, which was episode 29, the coronavirus speaks, and basically I go into how I think, this pandemic and in general, crisis really tells you a lot about yourself. It tells you about your leaders. It tells you about the world you're in. And I think largely because, in pressure or high stress situations, it shows us where we're strong and it shows us where we're vulnerable. And sometimes it really clearly paints a picture of what our priorities have been and which ones have been nurtured, which ones have been neglected, what our character is, so on and so forth. So my observation through just different conversations with people, reading articles and social media, just in general, I would say in the last month. And so, by the way, this is going on, I think, I don't think, we just passed Easter Sunday, or what would have been Easter Sunday. So it means we've been here in California, we've been under the governor's order to seclude ourselves and just really limit our movement to necessary traveling to the store, to the doctor, essential people or people who have essential jobs, so on and so forth. So we're about a month into it and it's a big challenge. Again, it's unlike anything a lot of us has ever experienced or have ever experienced. Excuse my fumbling over myself. There's a lot going on. So, a lot of people are trying to be creative and adapt to this new state of being and this new life during this pandemic. And obviously, others are struggling to adapt. And, I think what that has left a lot of people with are the challenges and questions floating around, which are quite understandably if I'm looking for a job, should I even continue my job search, since a lot of companies are having hiring freezes and my gym is closed, and where do I exercise? How do I exercise? What do I do? And I think a lot of us can relate on many notes and many more. I think the high stress situations in general cause us to seek comfort in food, comfort in relaxation, thought, sex, drugs, you name it. For example, having an emotionally bad day, where you're tired or stressed, you could be craving a little salt and sugar. And, it's by and large because sugar and salt release dopamine in our brains, and it gives us a little, I don't know if it necessarily gives us a little high, but it gives us pleasure, whether you really are conscious of that or not. And I think even a colleague, a marketing colleague, a former colleague, told me in the marketing world, they call it SNS, for salt and sugar, because they know that, these kind of foods gives us pleasure. Just a fun little fact. So I feel like the general concern here is that during this pandemic, a lot of people have a lot of important tasks and or functions in their lives, and it's been disrupted. It's making us uncomfortable in a way we've never experienced. And that disruption, or that continued disruption, may be a result of a lack of creativity, a lack of will, emotional and or physical fatigue. It just depends who you are and where you are in life. And it's not casting judgment. It's just, I think it's by and large factual. I'm not here to judge anybody at that, because I feel the crunch also, and I'm at times struggling to adapt also. And but I am here to tell you that it doesn't have to be that way. It really, really doesn't. We just have to be more flexible and adaptable if you're struggling with this. So the reason why I want to do this episode is to offer some solutions. You know, these are things that I've used, and I've known other people from different walks of life to use some of these methods. So I might just be saying it using different words or different descriptions. But I think if you kind of sit and think about it, what I suggest will sort of ring true. So let me get right to it. I want to kind of get through this because there's construction guys making a lot of noise and I don't want them to ramp up. So here we go. So solutions. Now look, first you have to remember that while we're in this thing, your personal needs and obligations won't go away. And who knows how long this seclusion is? Who knows how long, if you're in a particular part of the country or a particular part of the world, who knows how long you'll be secluded. But the fact is, your needs and your obligations will still be around. Like being in a crisis distracts us. And yes, sometimes we have to shuffle priorities and put things on hold. Totally understandable. However, I would say being in a state of crisis doesn't erase the necessity of tending to your personal needs for good health, financial stability, improving at your trade or your craft, and go ahead and fill in the blank with any other priorities like being a parent, business relationships, tending to your job search, etc. So the solutions I want to share are a mix of theories, and I would say principles and philosophies that can help you get beyond stagnation and resuming your rituals, your goals, your hobbies, your personal needs, whatever. All right. So I'll tell you what they all are at first, and then I'll dive into, what I mean and how I would apply them to your own situation. So number one, so this is a term I learned in business school, and it's the principle of doing nothing is doing something. Number two is maneuverability, and that's something I'm taking from the MMA world of grappling. Third one is something called minimum standards. That's something I got from a fitness professional I know, and I'll mention his name a little bit later. And the fourth one is what I call the Walter Payton method. And I'm talking about the late Hall of Fame running back, Walter Payton. So those are the four ones I want to share with you. So let me dive into the first one. The first one, again, doing nothing is doing something. And I'll say it one more time. Doing nothing is doing something. So here's a goofy example to keep things a little bit light. I know we're all stressed, so let me get a little bit silly for you. So let's say you're sitting on a park bench and you see a slow moving crowd of zombies approaching. And for some reason, you decide to sit still and just kind of see what happens when they reach you. And can you picture that? So if you're a Walking Dead fan, or you watched what was that movie? World War Z, or any other zombie movie, you can get an image in your head of zombies approaching you and knowing what the implications are. So you don't run away. So here it is. So when you decide to do nothing, and we're back in the real world, when you decide to do nothing about competing for business or your employment or staying fit. Let's stay with the other ones. Competing for business or competing for employment. You're clearing an easier path or an opportunity for those that are doing something about it, right? So another example is, when your gym is closed now and you're doing nothing about continuing your fitness regimen, the something in this example is that your strength, your endurance, and maybe your immune system is going to gradually dip. So when you make up your mind to do nothing, the ramifications is actually you're doing something. And it just really depends what we're talking about of what that something is. So the next one, maneuverability, right? And for those of us, actively trying to resume with our tasks and our rituals, but you're still struggling, consider what an experienced wrestler or an MMA grappler does versus the less skilled wrestler. So just to give you an example, when my older brother, and granted, my brother was almost 7 years older than I was. He was nearly a foot taller, a lot heavier, a lot stronger. And we used to roughhouse a lot. So when my older brother and I first started wrestling and fighting each other as brothers do, at first, he really, for like years, he had his way with me. Again, he was bigger, stronger, more skilled, had more tricks in his arsenal. And when we wrestled, I typically got really frustrated very quickly and exhausted, to the point where I was sweaty, I was tired, I was emotionally spent. And then, being like 7 years old, I can start crying. Total transparency, I would cry. I'll be so mad I would start crying. So he would win, he'll talk a little shit, slap me on the forehead, get up, it's like fight over. But as a couple of years passed by in later fights, I gradually got more creative and experienced with counter maneuvers, being thoughtful with my movements and what I was trying to do, understanding what he was trying to do versus just me expending a lot of wasted movement that exhausted me and made me just give up. So, I still didn't beat him for like many years to come. But what did happen is I started to walk away from our fights feeling less defeated because I started focusing less on the anger and more on leveraging the experience of learning his fighting style and how to fight him and how to use the little skill that I had in being more thoughtful and reflective. So it was really about changing my focus and being more adaptable. So in terms of finding alternatives that allow you to finish that project you've been procrastinating with, exploring a new diet or a workout, I think the key here is more so of getting beyond the frustration, stepping out of the mindset of disappointment and frustration as much as you can, and more so of stepping into a mindset of creative brainstorming and problem solving. So that's another one. And here's the third one. It's something I had a guest on a couple of months back, and it's one of my favorite, I would say, methods or mindsets. So my guest was a guy named Luke Dupron, and he's a lifestyle and fitness coach. And what he did during our interview is he shared a mental technique he likes to pass on to his clients called the minimum standard. And looking at this through the lens of maintaining your own personal fitness routine, he was basically saying, like, based on your lifestyle, based on the time you have and your mental bandwidth, figure out the absolute minimum days you can allocate towards working out. And I think from our interview, he used the example of, let's just say, parents of a newborn baby as people having very hectic and unpredictable schedules and low energy levels, due to the obvious lack of sleep and stress of being a new parent and not really knowing what you're doing. So his thing was set the bar and the expectation of getting your workouts in, set the bar low enough at working to, let's say, 2 days a week. So you don't needlessly set yourself up for failure by targeting an unrealistic 5 or 6 day workout schedule, then feeling like a failure when that target isn't met. I know if I was a new father, I would go from my 4 or 5 day workouts to maybe, I'm guessing, 1 or 2. I don't want to be a father. I'm just saying, let me just put that out there. But of course, if you have that minimum standard of 2 days and for some reason from week to week, you're able to get that up to 3 or 4 days, then that's great. That's above and beyond the minimum standard. So again, in applying this method to this new world we're in, set a reasonable bar for the kind of things that you need to get accomplished, the kind of food you need. Set a bar for what you're going to eat, because everything that you may customarily like or want may not be on the shelf. So maybe you have to make some kind of a compromise. Maybe devoting time to whatever project you have going on, maybe being a little more, strategic in the number of new connections you're trying to establish with people. And yes, like even that new workout. So like on that note, I personally am accepting the world of elastic bands and bodyweight exercise in place of my gym membership. And I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. I'm more of a guy that likes to use weights and just, have open wide space. I don't want to be in my living room or my bedroom, pulling giant rubber bands around like I don't know. I don't have anything clever or funny to say about that, but I just don't like it. But what I dislike more is the prospect of how my body will look and feel after doing absolutely nothing for the next 2, 3 or more months. I hate that a lot more. So the last one, or the last thing I want to share, is what I call the Walter Payton method. So I took that from, a little bit of backstory. So I heard this was told secondhand to me, and apparently, the late Hall of Fame running back Walter Payton was interviewed by a reporter, and you can go on YouTube and check out Walter Payton. Like, there's plenty of impressive video. You had this world-class athlete, elite athlete, highly accomplished, Super Bowl champion from the Chicago Bears, and Walter Payton. He was a record holder for, I think, the most rushing yards in the NFL at one time. Maybe that record still stands. I don't know. So as was told to me, basically a reporter says like, hey, Walter, you're this ultra accomplished running back. What was the secret to your success? And Walter basically says, I always kept my feet moving. Simple. He kept his feet moving. So the mindset in that is, in my opinion, you always have to stay active in the important or highly prioritized endeavors that you might have. Maybe it's parenting. Maybe it's starting a business. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's, maybe you're running for office and this is your first time doing it. But I think when in doubt, do something. Don't be so afraid to make mistakes that you're paralyzed and you're overthinking things and doing nothing. I think part of figuring out a new path and making progress is the act of exploration. And we can't be so tentative and so timid that overthinking things it's like a case of paralysis through analysis, or however the saying goes. And nobody's advocating that you be reckless, but take the first step and figure it out as you go, and you continue to take take subsequent steps. So if you're an entrepreneur or a business owner and your priority is maybe deeper social engagement in the social media space, and make it a point to be active in that world on a regular basis, maybe you got to carve out a half an hour or an hour to do that more actively. I know that's something I definitely need to do a lot more of. And I think the value in that is that you're actively working towards a goal incrementally. You're gaining experience, you're figuring things out through that continued activity. So with all of these, I think the value in implementing what I'm suggesting, look, it's like nobody really knows when our lives will resume after the pandemic with this whole corona thing, and nobody knows what that's going to look like. I think very people know at all, and I think the people who may be right about it in hindsight, I think a lot of people they're just guessing. Nobody really knows. But let's say it's 3 or 4 months from now, 3 or 4 months down the road, before we can resume what can be considered a normal state of life. The question is, where do you want to be in all of these projects? Your job search, your small business, your fitness regimen. Where do you want to be in all these things when the world does resume back to a normal state? Is it a better thing for you to commit to a decent level of effort toward these priorities versus nothing at all? Well, I think so. And by the way, it's much harder to resume an activity after long gaps. Well, no. Let me correct myself. It's much harder to resume an activity after a long gap of doing nothing versus maybe continuing some consistency of a given activity at your current level of output. Then I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is it's easier to put forth a little more energy in an activity after a sustained time versus stopping for several months and then all of a sudden you're picking it back up. Because when things do open up, whenever that is in the future, companies will be looking for candidates, different employers. Entrepreneurs will be looking for different partners. They'll be putting forth a lot of effort and looking for new relationships. And if we're looking at it from a fitness point of view, it's better that you're not starting over at ground zero at a time where so much is going to be going on in the next several months. There's going to be so much movement happening in other parts of your life. So I just wanted to hop in and drop that as like a follow-up to the last episode. I really, really hope it helped. I really hope, maybe just a piece or all of it can be somewhat useful to you. Just real quick, the next couple episodes are going to be kind of cool. I'm going to have 2 guests. One guy he's a CEO or president of a nonprofit called Fathers Uplift. They basically help ex-cons integrate back in society and link up with their families. And an impressive guy named Charles Daniels, even President Obama endorsed the guy or just really gave him a big shout out for the good work he and his organization is doing. And another guy I'm having on his name is Pete Evans from a foundation called, it's escaping me, called the Trinity Foundation. What's cool about that to me is these guys, they hunt all these dirty and unscrupulous these prosperity preachers that really are dishonest in preying upon innocent, God-fearing people for more donations, and then they end up having like 3 jets, a mansion, while their parishioners are like barely making it or fighting bankruptcy. So 2 very interesting gentlemen I'll have on in the next couple of episodes. So again, I hope this really helped. If you are listening to this on YouTube, you can check out the description. Excuse me. Check out the description. I have a link to look up Luke Dupron if you're interested in a very sensible approach to lifestyle and fitness. I'll also include the links for the Center of Disease Control and the World Health Organization in case you want more information on educating yourself and protecting yourself from the coronavirus. And last but not least, the email is info@themisconnected.com. We're on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook on social media. Just look up Misconnected Podcast. You search, you can find that. I really don't remember what the handle is. And of course, the podcast is on several platforms: iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn, and I already mentioned YouTube. So that's what I got for you. Be well, be safe, and see you next episode.